There's a strange point in saving money where the number you're aiming for can actually make it harder to begin. Say your basic monthly expenses are $2,000. Rent or mortgage, groceries, utilities, insurance, transportation, the expenses that keep normal life running. 3 months of expenses means $6,000. 6 months means $12,000. A full year means $24,000. And if you currently have $300 sitting in savings, $24,000 doesn't feel like a goal. It feels like a reminder of how far behind you are. I've seen this happen with money plans for years. People choose a respectable target, calculate what they'd have to save every month, and the plan works beautifully on paper. Then real life gets involved. The car needs tires. The electric bill jumps. Someone in the family needs something. You spend more at the grocery store than expected. Suddenly, the $400 you planned to save this month becomes $150, and once the plan has been broken, something subtle happens. You start thinking you need a fresh start next month, after Christmas, after the credit card is paid down, after the vacation, after things settle down. But life has a remarkable ability to remain unsettled. That's why I want to show you a different way to think about building a serious cash reserve. I call it the $50 rule. The number itself isn't magical. You could adapt it if your finances require something different. What matters is what the number does to the decision. Instead of repeatedly asking, "How am I going to save $20,000?" you reduce the job to a decision small enough to repeat. Can I move the next $50? And there are 3 parts to making this work. The first gets you started. The second is what makes the balance grow much faster than you'd expect. And the third is the part I think matters most, because it keeps one expensive month from destroying the entire plan. Let's start with the basic problem. Suppose 2 people each decide they want a $20,000 emergency fund. The first person looks at the goal and says, "I'm going to save $500 every month." That sounds responsible. At $500 a month, ignoring interest, the target takes 40 months. $500 goes in. Month 2. Another $500. The account reaches $1,000 and things are moving. Then month 3 arrives with a $620 repair. Now there isn't $500 available. Maybe there's $100. Maybe there's nothing. Mathematically, this shouldn't be a disaster. One bad month barely changes a multi-year plan. Psychologically, however, people often experience it very differently. The plan was $500 a month. They failed to save $500. So the plan feels broken. I've made versions of this mistake myself with long-term goals, designing the plan around what a good month can support, instead of asking what an ordinary, inconvenient month can survive. A saving system has to work in February when nothing exciting is happening. It also has to survive the month when the dentist, the mechanic, and the insurance company all seem to know each other. Yides, that brings us to the first part of the $50 rule. First, calculate your essential monthly spending. Leave out restaurants, vacations, entertainment, upgrades, and expenses you could realistically stop during a financial emergency. You're trying to answer a fairly grim but useful question. If my income stopped tomorrow, what would it cost to keep the household functioning for 1 month? Let's use $2,000. A full year would therefore be $24,000. That number is useful once. After that, stop making it your daily focus. Divide it into $50 units. $24,000 divided by $50 gives you 480 units. From that point forward, your immediate target is simply the next $50. You can keep track of the larger progress, of course. I'm not suggesting you pretend the final number doesn't exist, but the action you're responsible for today is much smaller. This works for a fairly ordinary reason. Large financial goals contain dozens of decisions you cannot make yet. You don't know what your income will be 11 months from now. You don't know what the car will cost. You don't know whether your insurance will increase or whether some completely unrelated expense will show up. But you can make one decision about the next $50, and once that money has been transferred, you can eventually make the decision again. There's another advantage. Progress becomes visible much sooner. If you're staring at a $24,000 target and you've saved $750, the account can still feel almost empty. Under this system, you've completed 15 $50 deposits. Same money, different way of measuring the work. But if all we did was save $50 occasionally, we'd be here for a very long time. So we need the second part, and this is where the rule becomes much more useful. Think about the last 12 months. Maybe you canceled a subscription. Maybe you received a tax refund. Perhaps you sold something you weren't using, worked a little overtime, got reimbursed for an expense, received a small bonus, or finally finished paying something off. Where did that money go? For many households, there isn't a clear answer. That's one of the odd things about cash flow. A new $40 expense is immediately noticeable. Remove a $40 expense, and the extra money can disappear into normal spending without anybody making a conscious decision. Suppose you cancel 2 subscriptions totaling $31 a month. That isn't quite one $50 unit. So let it accumulate until it is. $19 becomes available. Transfer $50. Or suppose your car insurance renewal comes in $112 cheaper than expected. Transfers. The remaining $12 stays in your normal cash flow. Maybe you receive an $850 tax refund. Before deciding that all $850 belongs in the emergency fund, deal with the money in $50 pieces. You might transfer $50, then another $50, and continue based on what your finances can safely handle. The point is to prevent unexpected or newly available money from automatically becoming spending money. Because lifestyle has a way of absorbing whatever you give it. You cancel a $70 expense, and somehow 3 months later, your checking account looks exactly the same. The money didn't disappear. Your spending simply expanded into the space. So I would keep a very simple list. Subscription canceled, $18. Phone plan reduced, $22. Insurance savings, $16. That's $56 of newly available cash. One $50 transfer goes to the reserve. $6 remains. No elaborate spreadsheet required. Now combine that with an automatic transfer on payday. For our example, suppose you're paid twice a month and automatically move $50 each payday. That's $100 a month, or $1,020 a year, before you've captured a single dollar from canceled expenses, refunds, overtime, or other irregular money. The automatic transfer establishes the floor. The extra $50 transfers create the acceleration. And this is where people often become too aggressive. You have a good month. There's $350 available. You get excited and decide to save all $350. Then the checking account becomes uncomfortable. A week later, you transfer $200 back. That doesn't accomplish much except making saving feel chaotic. Which brings us to part 3. I want every voluntary savings decision under this system to stay at $50. If $300 becomes available and you genuinely want to save all of it, that's fine. Make 6 separate $50 decisions. That sounds almost silly until you consider what it forces you to do. After the first $50, you ask whether the second is comfortable, then the third. By the 5th transfer, perhaps you realize that leaving the final $100 in checking would give you a better cushion until payday. Good. You saved $200 without putting yourself in a position where you need to raid the savings account next Thursday. The $50 limit acts like a speed governor. It slows down enthusiasm enough to make the plan sustainable. And sustainability matters because saving money has a peculiar emotional cycle. At the beginning, you're motivated because you're changing something. Then eventually nothing happens. There's no milestone that week. The balance isn't impressive yet. You're simply transferring money while bills continue arriving. That's where a lot of financial habits quietly disappear. A smaller, repeatable decision has an advantage during this boring middle period. It doesn't require much emotional energy. You don't have to recommit to becoming a financially responsible person every payday. The transfer simply happens. And if you can't afford it one payday, skip it. This is important. Suppose you've been following the rule for 8 months, and then the transmission needs work. That month, your normal $50 transfer would make cash flow too tight. Don't make it. The system isn't broken. There is no debt owed to your savings account. You don't need to save $100 next payday to make up for your moral failure. Resume with $50 when your finances allow it. That flexibility is one reason a smaller system can outlast a more ambitious one. Let's put some reasonable numbers around it. We'll use a hypothetical household. Essential expenses are $2,000 per month, so a one-year reserve would be $24,000. They begin with $500 already saved. Then they automate $50 twice per month. That's $1,200 a year. During the year, they also find $600 from reducing recurring expenses, $1,000 from a tax refund they can safely save, $400 from occasional extra work, and another $300 from miscellaneous refunds, rebates, or money that would otherwise have blended into checking. Well, D2, that's $3,000 added during the first year. Their balance goes from $500 to roughly $4,000 before considering any interest. They haven't built a full year, but consider what $4,000 changes. A $700 car repair becomes irritating rather than financially destabilizing. A large insurance deductible becomes possible. A temporary interruption in income doesn't immediately have to go on a credit card. And this is where I think emergency fund discussions sometimes get the emphasis wrong. We spend so much time debating whether somebody needs 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, that we can overlook the enormous difference between having $200 and having $4,000. Financial security doesn't suddenly switch on when you reach some official number. It improves gradually as the reserve grows. Your first $500 matters. So does your first $1,000. 1 month of expenses matters a great deal. 3 months changes the situation again. A year may eventually be appropriate for some households, particularly when income is irregular or replacing a job could take a long time. You build toward the level that fits your circumstances. For some people, it may be a household with 2 stable incomes, low fixed expenses, strong insurance coverage, and plenty of accessible investments may decide 6 months is more than adequate. Someone self-employed, supporting a family on one income, working in a volatile industry, or approaching retirement may sleep better with considerably more cash. Personal finance becomes unhelpful when every household gets handed the same number. But I do like using 12 months as a distant direction rather than an immediate demand, because a larger reserve buys something that doesn't appear on the bank statement: time. If you lose a job with 2 weeks of expenses saved, the first available job can quickly become the only acceptable job. With several months saved, you have room to make a better decision. If the roof needs work, you have time to get another quote. If a family member needs help, you have options that don't immediately begin with a credit card. Cash reserves aren't exciting assets. They probably won't be the part of your financial life that makes you wealthy. Their job is to keep a temporary problem from forcing a permanent financial decision. Your emergency savings should generally be somewhere safe, liquid, and separate enough that you don't casually spend it. For many people, that means an insured savings account or another appropriate cash equivalent account where the money remains accessible. Don't become so obsessed with squeezing every possible fraction of return from emergency cash that you forget its purpose. This money has a job. If the furnace dies on Wednesday, you shouldn't need to study market conditions before deciding whether you can pay the repair bill. And I would also avoid keeping a large emergency reserve mixed into the checking account you use every day. When $8,000 of emergency savings is sitting beside your grocery money, the account balance can make you feel richer than your actual spending budget allows. Separation creates useful friction. You can reach the money when you need it, but you don't see it every time you buy lunch. There is one situation where I would not make this rule the priority. If your essential expenses are consistently higher than your income, A savings technique cannot solve that arithmetic. Suppose $3,200 comes in every month, and the household genuinely needs $3,450 for essential bills. Finding another $50 to transfer doesn't repair the $250 deficit. You first need to work on the gap. That could mean reducing a major fixed expense, increasing income, reviewing benefits or assistance you're eligible for, restructuring debt, or some combination that fits the situation. I wouldn't want somebody watching this video to struggle through an impossible monthly budget and conclude they lack discipline because they couldn't save another $50. Sometimes the numbers themselves need attention before the habit does. But once there is even a little breathing room, that's exactly where this approach becomes useful. Because $50 doesn't require you to wait for your finances to become perfect. If you're going to try the $50 rule, don't spend the next 3 weeks designing it. Take your essential monthly expenses and write down the number. Then decide what reserve makes sense as your eventual destination. Maybe your first target is 1 month, then 3, then 6. Perhaps you eventually work toward 12. Next, automate one $50 transfer on a payday where it comfortably fits. If twice a month works, great. If once a month is what your budget can support, start there. Then look for money that's already trying to escape unnoticed. A subscription you barely use, a bill you can legitimately reduce, a refund, a month where groceries came in under budget. Extra income. Every time at least $50 becomes genuinely available, give yourself the option of moving another $50. Over time, something interesting happens. The balance stops looking like a savings project and starts behaving like protection. The first time an unexpected $400 bill arrives and you can simply pay it, you'll understand the difference. You may be annoyed. You may complain about the bill all evening, but you won't have to wonder which credit card still has room. That's progress you can feel. And eventually the account may reach 1 month of essential expenses, then 2, then 3. Maybe years from now, you look at it and realize you have enough cash to cover an entire year of basic life. Won't have happened because one January morning you suddenly became incredibly disciplined. It will be the result of hundreds of ordinary decisions that were small enough to survive ordinary life. That's what I like about the $50 rule. A large savings target can make you constantly aware of what you haven't accomplished yet. $50 gives you something you can accomplish this payday. So if a year of savings currently sounds absurd, don't begin with the year. Look at the next $50. Move it when you safely can. Then get on with your life. Gray finances. Money decisions made clear.